Hello, everybody. Today we're going to spend about 15 minutes with you talking about money. My name is Mindy, and with me is Bill. We are from an organization called CARE. CARE is a group of mostly lawyers and judges who work with bankruptcy courts. I am Mindy Schools. I'm a native Washingtonian, and I have over 11 years of experience in the financial services industry, mainly working in banking. And I've been a CARE volunteer for several years now. And I'll turn it over to Bill so he can introduce himself.
Thank you, Mindy. Hello, I'm Bill Barrett. I'm a bankruptcy lawyer, and that means that I go to a court called the Bankruptcy Court, and I've done that for 30 years. And as I have gone to court over the time, I often see people in the court, just normal people, usually in their middle of their adult life, and they're in bankruptcy court because they got into financial trouble. And that means they ran out of money and they couldn't pay the bills that they owed. And we saw that, lawyers like me and the judges, and we really thought if we could talk to high school students about what we know and what we see, maybe we could help them and give them information that will keep them out of bankruptcy when they become adults. So that's our goal here today, and that's why Mindy and I are here.
Thanks, Bill. And we're excited to be here today to talk to you about the 3 important things that you need to know about money. Specifically, we're going to talk about building a budget, saving money, and how to build good credit. Through our work in the financial industry, we've seen that mastering these 3 basic skills can set you up for good financial management for your entire life. We're going to talk about each of these 3 skills briefly today. However, because they're so important, we'll be creating additional videos that go into depth for more depth about each topic. We're gonna start with the most important thing about taking care of your money. That's budgeting or living by a budget. You all have some idea what a budget is, but we're going to go into more detail. Basically, a budget is a plan for how you use and save the money that you will get. A budget works best when it's written down, either on paper or on a document like your computer or your phone. Bill, how can someone start to use a budget?
Well, think of a budget like a research paper you do for school. Like a research paper, a budget is made with information you go out and you collect from different places. A good way to start collecting what you need to do for a budget is to start tracking the money you have coming in and the money you have going out. You'll need to pick a time period. Could be a month, could be 2 weeks, or could be a week, but you need a period by which you're going to track your expenses. If you have a job and you get paid every other week, say like every other Friday, then you'll probably want to have a budget that is 2 weeks, because that relates to the time you get paid. What do you track? You track everything you spend money on. Do you spend money on food? Do you spend money at a grocery store, at a restaurant? Do you pay for a phone or a data plan? Do you buy gas for a car? Do you prepay for things you buy online, such as music apps? All these are expenses that you should track. As you track, you start grouping your expenses by certain types. On the screen right now, we show an example of expenses from someone, and you can see there's certain groups like gifts, clothing, sports, food. These are groups that you track your expenses, and you put your expenses into these sorts of groups. Otherwise, you're just going to have a whole lot of different expenses. And unless you put them into groups, you're going to have a hard time budgeting for it. There are apps on the internet you can find that help you do this. One is called mint.com. That might be helpful. Now, after a while tracking expenses, you're going to know how much you're spending and how you're spending it. That's good information to know, but it's not a budget yet because it's not a plan for the future. That's what a budget is. It's a plan to take you into the future. To make a budget, you need to go to the next step, which is decide how your income, which is the money you have coming in, is going to be spread or allocated around the expenses that you expect to incur. Let's use an example. Let's say you have a job and your pay is $1,000 on the last day of each month. That's $1,000 net. That means the taxes are already taken out. So you have $1,000 a month, and you need to then allocate that to the expenses you expect to spend. Because you've been tracking your expenses, you can make an estimate of what they will be in the future by looking at what they've been in the past. If you spend $100 a month on food in the past, then you know in the future you should allocate in your budget $100 for food. And the same thing with all your other categories of expenses. Now, there's a good way to get started on budgeting, and that's called the envelope method. Mindy, I know you've used a version of the envelope method. Can you tell us what you do?
Of course I can, Bill. I do use a form of the envelope method, but instead of separate paper envelopes, I use separate bank accounts. Each bank account has a category like loan payments or bills, groceries, clothing, hair care, what have you. I know how much I need to spend on each one of those categories. And so I put that amount of money into that account whenever I get paid. And when that account is at zero, I know I can't spend any more for that category. And any extra money I have goes into my savings account.
Well, that sounds good for things like rent, car payments, food, things that you have to buy all the time. But there's some things you only buy once in a while. How does the envelope method work for those sorts of things?
That is a good question, Bill. Yes, some categories of expenses change a lot from month to month. Take shoes, for instance. You don't have to buy a new pair of shoes every month, maybe only 2 or 3 times a year. How do you budget for that, you ask? You should estimate the total amount that you will spend on shoes for the year and then divide that amount by the number of budget periods that you will have during the year. So if you estimate that you will buy 3 pairs of shoes during a year and that shoes cost about $100 a pair, then you should budget $300 for the year. If you're doing monthly budgets, then you should divide by 300. You should divide 300 by 12 months, I should say, which comes out to $25 a month. So each month you would put $25 into an envelope marked shoes. If you don't buy shoes in a month, then the $25 stays in the envelope. It rolls over like unused minutes on a phone plan, and $25 more will be added next month. After a few more months, you'll have $100 in the envelope, and you can then afford to buy your pair of shoes. Bill, what do you think about that?
Well, Mindy, I think those shoes look really sharp. Using the envelope method can be a lot of work, and so after a while, you're going to move on to easier ways to budget, such as using a budgeting app. You'll find a way that works best for you. But using the envelope method, using this idea that Mindy has just explained, is a very good way to start practicing and learning the basics of budgeting. And budgeting is like a sport, it's like playing a musical instrument. You can't get good without practice and mastering the basics.
That is so true, Bill. And when we talk about budgets, we talk about money coming in and money going out. You can't have more money going out than you have coming in. You can't spend more money once the envelope is empty. But that does not mean that you should spend all the money that comes in. There should be money that's left over, and that leftover money is what you save. When you save money, you're paying yourself and holding the money for when you need it. Did you ever hear the expression, save it for a rainy day? Do you know what it means? It means to put money aside for when you might really need it. How do you put money aside, you might be wondering? Well, you can put it in a piggy bank or under a mattress, but most adults use things like bank accounts and retirement accounts for money they've saved. Have you ever heard of a 401k plan or an IRA account or a mutual fund? Those are all types of savings in which money can be put away for a rainy day. And not only is the money kept in savings for when you need it, but while it's in the savings account, it's earning interest. So you're making money with your money. In a few minutes, we'll talk about interest that you pay on what you owe others, but this is interest that will be paid to you.
So Mindy, I've always heard the expression, save it for a rainy day, and I always kind of wondered what it meant. Do you mean a gentle, warm drizzle, or do you mean a thunderstorm?
Well, it can be different types of storms depending on what you're going through in your life. But it can mean 2 things, one good and one not so good. A good rainy day is when you want to buy something that will cost much more than what you could afford to pay for it at any given time. Some examples of good rainy days would be vacations, computers, college classes, furniture, or your first car. But sometimes in adult life, we all have bad rainy days or really stormy days, a really heavy thunderstorm. You might lose your job, or your car could break down, your mom might get sick. When one of these things happens, you'll need a lot of money to deal with the problem. Unless you have saved a lot of money, for when something bad happens, you may be in real trouble. A general rule of thumb is to save 10% of your income for rainy days. When you're an adult, you'll want to build up an emergency fund that could cover 6 to 8 months of your living expenses. This can be hard to do, especially if you're living paycheck to paycheck, but starting small and saving what you can is very important.
What Mindy has talked about so far is a cash budget. By that, we mean that when you get money, you get it in cash, like when you cash a paycheck. And we also mean that when you spend money, you are either using cash that's in your pocket, or you might be using a debit card. A debit card is like cash because a debit card takes money directly out of your banking account at the time you use the card. As a teenager, most of the money you get and most of the money you spend will be cash. It's either in your pocket, it's in a drawer in your bedroom, or it's in a savings account at a bank. But nearly all adults also use credit, which means they buy things with money they borrow from someone else. Adults mostly use credit cards. In fact, right now, during the COVID-19 quarantine, many stores, restaurants, and gas stations will not accept cash. They will only accept credit cards. We'll talk about credit histories, reports, and scores in another program. But for now, we want to talk about how credit cards are used as a part of budgeting and how to use credit cards the best way so that you do not get into trouble with them. Credit cards make it easier to track expenses because you get a receipt every time you use a card. You should keep these receipts and track the expenses on them just as you would track expenses when you get a receipt for something you paid for in cash. Don't wait until you get the credit card bill, which comes the next month, before you start tracking expenses on the bill. It might already be too late. You may have already spent more money than you budgeted on a certain type of expense, such as dining out. When you get the bill from the credit card company the next month, you should pay the bill in full and by the payment date that is printed on the bill. If you do that, you will not pay interest to the credit card company. It will also help your credit score, but we'll talk about that in another program.
Thanks, Bill. That was some really great information. But as we talked about a few minutes ago, some expenses like buying shoes don't happen every month. Those things could be too expensive to pay for in just 1 month. You need several months to spread out the costs. We talked about using the envelope method to accumulate cash for a big purchase, but how would you do that if you're using a credit card for everything?
Well, that's a good question, and there are two ways. First, you could let cash build up in your bank account for those larger purchases. The money will be there so that once you make the purchase and you get the bill the next month, you'll have the money in your bank account to pay that bill in full. Now, the reality in life is sometimes you can't do that. And an example I often think of is if you're starting college in the fall and you get there in September and you realize that you're going to need a laptop or a tablet or some device that you don't have because it's needed for one of your classes. One of your classes may require have an application that doesn't run on the phone or on the laptop you already have. So you need to go out and buy a new device. And let's say that costs $1,000. Should you buy it on a credit card, even though you don't have the money saved up to cover that bill when it comes in the next month? The answer could be yes, if you have a plan to pay off that charge, that expense you put on your credit card bill. Let's say that you're going to buy the computer for $1,000. And also let's say that you have a job and that each month from your job, you can afford $100 or you can allocate $100 towards paying off the bill for the computer. So it will take 10 months to pay off that computer at $100 a month, plus there's going to be a little bit of interest. Here in our example, it's the second line down, $49 of interest. So if you take 10 months to pay the $1,000 and $49, you have paid off the computer under a plan, and that's a good plan. Now, the funny thing about credit cards is when you get the bill, you don't have to pay it off in full. In fact, they don't really want you to pay it off in full, and they'll have on the bill what's called a minimum payment. Up on the screen right now, there's a sample credit card statement, and at the bottom line says payment due date. That's the day you have to make your payment on, otherwise you're going to hurt your credit score. And above that is something called minimum payment. That's only $25. but the charges, the balance of charges on your card is $1,028. Why, if you owe $1,028, do you only have to pay $25? Well, the reason for that is that's how credit card companies make most of their money. By only making you pay a minimum payment, the rest rolls over to the next month, just like unused minutes on a data plan. But as it rolls over, it picks up interest. That's money you have to pay on that amount that rolls over. That can make making minimum payments very expensive because you keep picking up interest every time it rolls over. So if you go back to the computer example, if you buy a computer for $1,000 and you're just going to make monthly payments of $25 because that's the minimum payment, it's going to take you 80 months to pay off that computer. In that 80 months, you're going to pay $333 in interest. So you're going to pay a total of $1,333 in interest. Total payments for that computer over 80 months. Now, I don't know about your devices, but my devices don't last 80 months. Long before you're done paying off this computer, it's going to be broken and it's not going to work. So the point is that if you pay your credit card bill in full and on time, or as soon as you can, you will lower the amount of interest you have to pay. That's good for you, bad for the credit card company.
Thank you, Bill. That was really great information. I can't imagine paying that much for a computer that probably will be broken by the time I finish paying it off. That is amazing.
Well, and our point is this: if you're going to use a credit card to make big purchases that you will not be able to pay in full in the next month, you must have a plan for when you're going to pay off that purchase, how much you're going to pay each month. And the plan should be to pay it off as fast as you can so that you pay the smallest amount of interest. The sooner you pay it off, the less you'll pay in total.
Thank you, Bill. Really, really great advice.
So Mindy, now can we review the major points we discussed today and let our audience get on with their business?
So let's review what we've talked about today. I know we covered a lot and we want to make sure that you can get it all down, and we want to do a recap for you. So remember, a budget is a plan for your money, and failing to plan is planning to fail. There's no set way to do a budget. You need to find a system that works best for you. Creating a budget will help you save money for the future, for light rainy days, or for heavy thunderstorms. We also talked about credit, AKA your ability to borrow money. And paying back what you borrowed in a timely manner helps you build good credit. With that being said, make sure you have fun while managing your finances. Your financial journey can actually be a fun one. It doesn't need to be boring. Investing in yourself and investing in your financial knowledge is definitely an investment in your future.
Thank you, Mindy. Very good advice.
You're welcome. And I do believe that if you are interested, here you can go to this website, thecareforyourfuture.org, to get more information about these topics, blogs, or other resources. Make sure you visit us so you can learn more, and stay tuned for our next video.